What is this supposed to be? You print this off the internet? Sir, that's my military ID and my orders. I'm on active duty. Anybody can buy a costume. That doesn't make you a Marine. I'm Staff Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps. Why are you grabbing me?
At 6:15 on a Wednesday morning, on Highway 101 near Richmond, California, two state police officers pulled over a car for allegedly crossing the fog line. The driver stepped out, in full United States Marine Corps dress blues, medals earned in Iraq and Afghanistan visible on his chest, white cover hat, regulation perfect. He informed them he was a Marine captain, showed his military ID, his orders, his registration. They didn't believe him. "Anybody can buy a costume," one officer said. Then they slammed him face first onto the highway asphalt, while he was in full dress uniform, while he wasn't resisting, while passing cars watched, while his white gloves scraped across the pavement trying to break his fall. His cover hat, the symbol of Marine Corps honor, lay in the road like trash. The man was Captain Jonathan Carter, 34 years old, 12 years of service, 2 combat deployments. A Marine logistics officer returning to Camp Pendleton after attending a fallen teammate's memorial service. He'd spent the night in Sacramento, honoring a brother who didn't make it home. Now he was face down on a California highway, at the hands of the people who were supposed to protect him. 18 minutes later, the Marine Corps was demanding answers. 6 hours later, federal agents walked into the Richmond Police Department. 4 months later, 3 police careers were destroyed. 3 officers were heading to federal prison. And the city of Richmond was writing a check for $4.5 million. One of the largest police brutality settlements in California history. This is the story of how one highway stop ended 3 careers. How it proved that even a Marine Corps dress uniform can't protect you from racist cops when they've already decided you don't belong. But it's also the story of how cameras, witnesses, and federal power can deliver justice when the evidence is undeniable and when someone refuses to look away. Before we go any further, if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that like button, subscribe to Voices Unchained, share this video with someone who needs to see that justice is still possible when the right people are watching. Now let's talk about the 3 cops who thought they were untouchable. To understand what happened that morning, you need to know who these officers really were, not the version they presented to the public, but who they were when the cameras weren't rolling, when the supervisors weren't watching, because this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, years in the making, protected by a system that chose to look the other way. Derek Walsh had been a cop for 16 years, and in that time, he'd learned exactly how much he could get away with. At 42, he walked through the Richmond Police Department like he owned the place. And in some ways, he did. 11 excessive force complaints sat in his personnel file. 11. Each one carefully buried by supervisors who'd decided the department needed Walsh more than it needed accountability. The complaints all had something in common. Every single victim was Black or Latino. And every single incident involved Walsh deciding someone didn't look right, didn't belong. He didn't fit what he thought they should be. His partner, Ryan Garrett, was cut from the same cloth. 38 years old, 11 years on the force, 7 complaints of his own. Garrett was the muscle to Walsh's mouth, the guy who'd put his hands on you while Walsh told you why you deserved it. Just 6 months earlier, Garrett had broken a teenager's wrist during a traffic stop. The body cam caught him joking about it later. "If they'd just comply, we wouldn't have to get physical." The complaint was dismissed. The kid got nothing. Garrett got a paid vacation while internal affairs went through the motions. Then there was Tommy Brennan, 26 years old, 2 years on the job. He'd started out idealistic, wanting to make a difference, be one of the good ones. But Walsh and Garrett had taught him the real rules fast. "Oh, keep your mouth shut. Back your partners. Never break the blue wall." Now Brennan just stood and watched, telling himself he was staying out of trouble, not realizing he was already neck-deep in it. That Wednesday morning, the 3 of them were running highway patrol on Interstate 101, the early shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Walsh liked the highway. You could pull anyone over for anything out here. Crossing the fog line, following too close. Lane drift. Pretextual stops. That's what the lawsuits called them. Walsh called them good police work. Multiple drivers had complained about Walsh over the years. Always the same pattern. Black and Latino drivers pulled over for minor infractions. Aggressive questioning, escalation for no reason. But the supervisors who'd buried those complaints? And they would later claim under oath that they never saw a pattern, never connected the dots, never thought Walsh's behavior was a problem worth addressing. Walsh had survived 11 complaints. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. Captain Jonathan Carter hadn't slept much. At 34, he'd spent 12 years in the Marine Corps, 2 combat tours, 1 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. He was a logistics officer stationed at Camp Pendleton, the kind of Marine who kept his bearing whether in uniform or not. Straight posture, measured movements, eyes that had seen too much but never looked away. The day before had been hard. He'd driven to Sacramento for a memorial service. Staff Sergeant Philip Williams, 32 years old, killed in a training accident 3 weeks earlier. Jonathan had served with Williams in Afghanistan. They'd been friends, brothers. At the service, Jonathan had stood in his dress blues, the same uniform Williams would have worn if he'd made it home. He'd saluted the flag-draped casket, shaken hands with Williams' parents, told them their son had been a good Marine, one of the best. After the service, there was a gathering, Marines telling stories, remembering the good times, avoiding the hard parts. Jonathan had stayed later than he'd planned. By the time he left, it was past midnight. He'd gotten a hotel room in Sacramento, set his alarm for 5 a.m. because he had to be back at Pendleton by noon for a logistics briefing. He'd considered changing out of his dress blues before the drive. But Marines are taught that you wear the uniform with pride. You don't treat it like a costume you take off when it's convenient. So at 5:30 that morning, Jonathan walked out of the hotel in full dress blues. White gloves, white cover, combat ribbons across his chest, the uniform that said, "I serve, I sacrifice, I belong." The drive from Sacramento to Camp Pendleton was about 400 miles, 6 hours if traffic cooperated. Jonathan stopped for coffee at a gas station. An older veteran saw his uniform and shook his hand. "Thank you for your service, Marine." Jonathan nodded. "Honor to serve, sir." He got back on the highway, Interstate 5 south to 101. The sun was just starting to come up. Dawn painted the sky in oranges and purples. He thought about Williams, about the memorial service, about how fragile life was, how quickly it could end. Yes, he thought about his own deployments, the friends who didn't make it home, the close calls, the luck. He didn't think about the patrol car that had just entered the highway behind him. He didn't notice when it moved into the lane behind his vehicle. Didn't see Walsh lean forward in the driver's seat. Didn't hear Walsh say to Garrett, "That car's drifting. Let's check it out." At 6:15 a.m., as Jonathan was thinking about a fallen brother and grateful to still be alive, the lights went on behind him, red and blue flashing in his rearview mirror. Jonathan looked down at his speedometer. 65, the speed limit. He checked his lane position. Centered. He took a breath. Not this morning, he thought. Please, not this morning. But he knew better than to hope. Jonathan did everything exactly right. But he put on his turn signal, checked his mirrors, moved to the shoulder smoothly, put the car in park, turned off the engine, placed his hands on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. Through his side mirror, he watched the officer approach. White guy, probably 40s, stocky build, moving with that swagger that said he'd done this 1,000 times. Jonathan kept his hands visible, kept his breathing steady. This wasn't his first traffic stop. He knew exactly how dangerous this moment was, even in full dress blues. Maybe especially in full dress blues. The officer walked up to the driver's side window, slower than necessary, looking into the car, at the uniform, at Jonathan's face. Jonathan could see the calculation happening, the officer seeing the uniform, seeing Jonathan's skin color, deciding which one to believe. The officer tapped on the window with his flashlight. Jonathan lowered it, kept one hand on the wheel. "Good morning, officer," Jonathan said. His voice was calm, respectful. "I'm Captain Jonathan Carter, United States Marine Corps. I need to inform you that I'm in regulation dress blues, traveling on official orders, and I have a registered firearm secured in my vehicle per military regulations. The officer, Walsh, though Jonathan didn't know his name yet, looked at him like he'd just said something absurd. A captain? Walsh said. The skepticism was thick. In the Marines? Yes, sir, Jonathan replied. I'm returning to Camp Pendleton from a memorial service in Sacramento. Would you like to see my military ID and orders? Walsh stared at him for a long moment, then glanced back at the uniform, at the medals, at the white gloves still on Jonathan's hands. Step out of the vehicle, Walsh said. Jonathan kept his voice even. May I ask what the reason for this stop is, officer? You were drifting over the fog line, Walsh said. Step out. Jonathan knew arguing wouldn't help. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door slowly, stepped out onto the shoulder. The morning air was cool. Highway traffic rushed past. The dawn light made his dress blues look even more official. The medals caught the light. Walsh's partner had gotten out of the patrol car. He walked around to the passenger side of Jonathan's vehicle, looking in the windows. I have my documentation right here, sir, Jonathan said. He reached slowly toward his inside jacket pocket. Keep your hands where I can see them, Walsh snapped. Jonathan stopped, hands visible, palms open. My military ID and orders are in my jacket pocket, Jonathan said carefully. May I retrieve them? Walsh nodded, but his hand moved to his weapon. Jonathan moved slowly, drew out his military ID, his orders, his driver's license, his vehicle registration. Walsh took them, examined the military ID like he was looking at a counterfeit bill. He actually laughed. And where'd you get this? He asked. Amazon? Jonathan felt the first flash of real anger, but his training kicked in. Stay calm. Don't give them an excuse. That's my official military identification, sir, Jonathan said. My orders are right there. I'm on official travel status returning to Camp Pendleton. Garrett walked over, looked at the documents, then at Jonathan, then at Walsh. What have we got? Garrett asked. Says he's a Marine, Walsh replied. Captain? Yeah, no less. Garrett looked Jonathan up and down. In that uniform? It's a dress blue uniform, Jonathan said. Regulation USMC. Walsh handed the documents to Garrett. Stepped closer to Jonathan. Too close. You know how many people we catch playing dress-up? Walsh said. Stolen valor, fake uniforms, trying to get military discounts or special treatment. I'm not playing dress-up, Jonathan said. His voice stayed level but harder now. I'm a Marine Corps officer. You can verify everything I just handed you. Uh-huh, Walsh said. And I'm a general. Garrett was running the license plate, checking the driver's license. Vehicle comes back clean, he said. License is valid. Walsh ignored him. He was looking at Jonathan's medals. These real? He asked, reaching toward Jonathan's chest. Jonathan stepped back. Don't touch my uniform, sir. That was the moment it shifted. Walsh's expression changed. Excuse me? My uniform, Jonathan said, still calm but firm. Please don't touch it without permission. You giving me orders? Walsh asked. No, sir, Jonathan replied. I'm asking you to respect my uniform. Garrett moved closer. His hand went to his belt. Turn around, Walsh said aside. Hands behind your back. Jonathan didn't move. For what reason, officer? Because I said so. Am I being detained? Jonathan asked. Am I under arrest? You're being uncooperative, Walsh said. Turn around. I've cooperated with every request, Jonathan said. I've provided all documentation. I've informed you of the firearm. I've answered your questions. What is the legal basis for detainment? And that question, that completely reasonable, constitutionally protected question, was what made Walsh decide to put his hands on a Marine officer. Legal basis, Walsh said, his voice rising. You want legal basis? How about interfering with an investigation? How about suspected stolen valor? How about you don't look like any Marine I've ever seen? There it was, out loud, on body cam. You don't look like any Marine I've ever seen. Not, your credentials don't check out. Not, your story seems suspicious. You don't look like one. Because Marines, in Walsh's mind, didn't look like Jonathan. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Officer, I'd like to speak with your supervisor." That was when Walsh grabbed his arm. Walsh's hand clamped onto Jonathan's forearm, hard, rough. "Hands behind your back," Walsh said. "Now." "I'm not resisting," Jonathan said. But I am requesting a supervisor." Garrett moved in from the other side, grabbed Jonathan's other arm. "Turn around," Garrett said. Jonathan complied, slowly, hands moving behind his back. "You people always think a uniform makes you special," Walsh said, close to Jonathan's ear. "Think it gives you a free pass." A car slowed down on the highway, the driver looking at the scene. A Marine in dress blues, 2 cops grabbing him. The car sped up, kept going, but another car pulled onto the shoulder. 50 yards back, emergency flashers on. The driver got out, a black man in his 50s, civilian clothes, phone already in his hand, already recording. Walsh didn't notice yet. "Anybody can buy a costume online," Walsh was saying, his hands patting down Jonathan's uniform. Rougher than necessary. $20 gets you medals. 50 gets you the whole setup. "These medals were earned," Jonathan said, his voice tight. "In Fallujah, in Kandahar, places you've never been." Walsh's hand pressed harder into Jonathan's back. "What did you just say to me?" "I said these medals were earned." Walsh shoved, hard. Jonathan's balance broke. He tried to catch himself, but Garrett had his arms. His knees hit the asphalt first, then his chest, then Garrett pushed down on his shoulders. And Jonathan's face hit the highway, hard. The impact sent stars across his vision, scraped his cheek. His white glove tore as his hand scraped the pavement. His cover hat fell, rolled, came to rest 5 feet away on the white line. "Stop resisting," Walsh yelled. But Jonathan wasn't resisting. He was on the ground, face against rough asphalt, arms being wrenched behind his back. I'm not resisting," he said, his voice muffled against the road. Cars were slowing down now, more witnesses, phones coming out. The man who'd pulled over earlier was walking closer, still recording. "That's a Marine officer," the man shouted. "What are you doing?" "Sir, stay back," Garrett yelled. But the man kept recording. Kept walking. Walsh's knee came down on Jonathan's back, between his shoulder blades, pressing down. The weight made it hard to breathe. "I said stop resisting," Walsh yelled again. "I'm not resisting," Jonathan managed. Brennan's patrol car pulled up, the rookie getting out, seeing the scene. A Marine in dress blues face down on the highway, his white cover hat in the road. 2 officers on top of him, a witness recording. Brennan should have said something, should have asked what was happening. I should have seen that this was wrong. Instead, he walked over and stood there, watching. Walsh pulled Jonathan's arms higher behind his back, too high. Jonathan's shoulders screamed. "You're hurting me," Jonathan said. "I'm complying. You're hurting me." "Should have thought about that before you got smart," Walsh said. The handcuffs clicked, tight, cutting into his wrists. Jonathan's face was still pressed against the asphalt. His dress blues were scraped, dirty. The uniform he'd worn to honor a fallen Marine, now ground into a California highway. The witness was closer now, recording everything. "I'm Philip Henderson," he called out. "I'm a veteran. That man is a United States Marine. You don't need to be doing this." Walsh looked up at him. "Sir, I will arrest you for interfering." "I'm 50 feet away," Philip said. I'm not interfering. I'm witnessing, and I'm recording everything." Walsh's expression changed. He looked at Garrett, then at the phone, then at the other cars slowing down. More phones. "We got cameras," Walsh said quietly to Garrett. "Say he was resisting." Garrett nodded, looked at his body cam. "Subject actively resisting arrest," Garrett said loudly. "For the record. Force necessary to secure the suspect." Jonathan's voice came from the pavement, weak, strained, but clear. "I never resisted. I'm a Marine Corps officer. I showed you my ID, my orders. I never resisted. This is assault." Walsh leaned down closer. "You think that uniform makes you better than me?" Jonathan didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The knee on his back was pressing too hard. Philip was on his phone now, calling someone. Yes. I need to report a Marine Corps officer being assaulted by police on Highway 101 northbound, just south of Richmond. I'm watching it happen right now. I have video. His name is on his uniform. Captain J. Carter, USMC. Yes, I'll send the video. Please hurry. Jonathan lay on the highway, face against the asphalt, hands cuffed behind his back. His dress blues, the symbol of Marine Corps honor, scraped and dirty. His white cover hat 20 feet away, like trash on the side of the road. Cars passing, witnesses watching, phones recording, and 3 police officers standing over a decorated combat veteran who'd done nothing wrong, except not look like what they thought a Marine should look like. At 6:23 a.m., Philip Henderson sent a video to the Camp Pendleton duty officer. At 6:25, that duty officer called the base commander. At 6:28, the base commander called NCIS, and at 6:31, while Jonathan was still on the ground, still in cuffs, still struggling to breathe under Walsh's knee, the United States Marine Corps began mobilizing to protect one of its own. Lieutenant Kevin Wilson was the duty officer at Camp Pendleton that morning. He'd taken the call from Philip Henderson at 6:23, listened to the description, watched the video file come through on his secure phone. What he saw made his blood run cold. A Marine, in dress blues, face down on a highway, 3 cops on top of him. The Marine wasn't fighting, wasn't resisting, was just taking it. Wilson could see the medals on the uniform, could see the cover hat on the road, could hear the Marine's voice. I'm not resisting. I'm a Marine Corps officer. Wilson didn't hesitate. He immediately called Colonel Philip Thornton, the base commander, at home. Sir, Wilson said when Thornton picked up, I need you to watch a video right now. One of our officers has been assaulted by state police on Highway 101. Thornton watched it at 6:25. His wife saw his face change, saw his jaw clench, saw his hand grip the phone tighter. When the video ended, Thornton was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he made 4 phone calls. Get me NCIS. See, he told his chief of staff. Get me the DOD Inspector General. Get me our JAG office. And I want the name of every officer involved, their department, their chain of command, and I want it in the next 10 minutes. By 6:30, at NCIS, Special Agent Cole Ashley was watching the video. By 6:35, a Marine Corps legal officer was on the phone with the California Highway Patrol Commissioner. Not requesting, demanding. Captain Carter's immediate release. Preservation of all footage. Full cooperation with federal investigation. Meanwhile, on Highway 101, Walsh and Garrett were getting Jonathan to his feet. His face was scraped, blood on his lip. His dress blues were dirty, his white gloves torn, but he stood straight, even in handcuffs, even after everything. He stood like a Marine. You're being detained for suspected stolen valor, Walsh said, resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. Jonathan looked at him. I never touched you. That's not what my report's gonna say, Walsh replied. Philip Henderson was still recording, still on the phone. They're putting him in the patrol car, he said to whoever he was talking to. He's in handcuffs, he's bleeding. They're claiming he resisted, but I watched the whole thing. He never resisted, not once. Walsh noticed Philip, really noticed him now. Sir, you need to leave. This is an active investigation. I'm on a public highway, Philip said. I have every right to be here. If you don't leave, I'll cite you for obstruction. Then cite me, Philip said, because I'm not going anywhere until I know that Marine is safe. They put Jonathan in the back of Walsh's patrol car, hands still cuffed behind his back, still in his dress blues, still bleeding, through the window. Jonathan could see his cover hat. Still on the highway, getting blown around by passing traffic. The symbol of everything he'd earned. As everything he'd sacrificed for. Just trash on the side of the road. Walsh got in the driver's seat, started the engine. Where are you taking me? Jonathan asked. Richmond Police Department, Walsh said. We'll verify your story there. You can verify it right now, Jonathan said. Well, call Camp Pendleton. Call the duty officer. My command will confirm everything. Walsh didn't respond, just pulled onto the highway, lights still flashing. What Walsh didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, his department was receiving a phone call from a Marine Corps colonel. What Garrett didn't know was that their body cam footage was already being requested by federal investigators. What Brennan didn't know was that the video Philip Henderson had recorded was already going viral on social media. And what none of them knew was that in 18 minutes, their careers would effectively be over. Because you can bury 11 complaints from civilians. You can dismiss reports from teenagers. You can ignore complaints from minorities. But you can't bury a Marine Corps officer in dress blues, on video, with federal witnesses, and expect the Pentagon to look the other way. By the time Walsh pulled into the Richmond Police Department parking lot, 3 things had already happened that he didn't know about. 1, NCIS had opened a federal investigation. 2, the Marine Corps Legal Office had contacted the California Attorney General. 3, Philip Henderson's video had been viewed 40,000 times and was climbing. Walsh and Garrett walked Jonathan into the building, still in cuffs, still in his scraped dress blues. The desk sergeant looked up, saw the uniform, saw the blood, saw the handcuffs. "What happened?" the sergeant asked. "Suspected stolen valor," Walsh said. Resisting arrest." The sergeant looked at Jonathan, at the medals, at the obvious quality of the uniform. "Did you run his ID?" "Fake," Walsh said. "We'll verify it here." That's when the desk sergeant's phone rang. He picked it up, listened. His face went pale. "Chief wants to see you," he said to Walsh. "Both of you, right now." Walsh and Garrett exchanged a look. "We need to process the suspect first." "No," the sergeant said. Chief said immediately, "Leave him with me." Chief Robert Dunleavy was in his office, on the phone. His face was red. When Walsh and Garrett walked in, Dunleavy held up one finger, kept listening to whoever was on the other end. "Yes." Sir," Dunleavy said, "man. Yes, I understand. We're pulling the footage now. Yes, sir. I will personally ensure. Yes, sir." He hung up, looked at Walsh and Garrett. "Tell me you didn't just assault a Marine Corps officer on the highway," he said. Walsh started to explain. "Chief, the subject was, is he active duty?" Dunleavy cut him off. "He claims to be, but is he active duty?" Walsh hesitated. "We haven't verified. His name is Captain Jonathan Carter," Dunleavy said. 12 years in the Marine Corps, currently stationed at Camp Pendleton. His credentials are real. His uniform is real. His service is real. And you just slammed him face first onto Highway 101. On camera. Garrett shifted his weight. "Chief, he was resisting. I just got off the phone with the Marine Corps colonel," Dunleavy said. Had his voice quiet. Dangerously quiet. "He's watched the video. A civilian recorded the whole thing. He tells me Captain Carter never resisted, never fought, never did anything except ask why he was being stopped." Walsh's face was red now. "He was giving us attitude." "Attitude?" Dunleavy's voice rose. "You assaulted a decorated Marine officer because he had attitude?" Dunleavy's phone rang again. He picked it up. Yes, they're in my office now. I understand." He hung up, looked at both officers. "That was NCIS. They're on their way here. They're taking custody of Captain Carter. They're demanding all body cam footage. They're launching a federal investigation. And you two are suspended, effective immediately." "Chief," Walsh started. "Badges," Dunleavy said. "Weapons, access cards, on my desk, now." Walsh didn't move. This is premature. We haven't even given our statements." "You gave your statement on your body cams," Dunleavy said. "And I've already reviewed the footage. It shows exactly what the civilian video shows. An unprovoked assault on a compliant subject, who happens to be a United States Marine Corps officer in full dress uniform." Garrett pulled his badge off his belt, set it on the desk, his weapon next, his access card. Walsh stood there for another moment, then slowly did the same. The metal made a small sound as it hit the wood, the sound of careers beginning to end. Downstairs, Jonathan sat in an interrogation room, still in cuffs. The desk sergeant had gotten him water. Asked if he needed medical attention. Jonathan said no. He just wanted the cuffs off. The sergeant said he had to wait for the chief's orders. So Jonathan sat and waited, in the uniform he'd worn to honor a fallen brother, now covered in highway dirt and blood. The door opened. Chief Dunleavy walked in, followed by two people in civilian clothes, federal badges on their belts. "Captain Carter," the woman said, "I'm Special Agent Cole Ashley, NCIS. This is Special Agent Philip Rodriguez. We're here to take you into federal custody for your protection and to document what happened." She looked at the desk sergeant. "Uncuff him. Now." The sergeant complied. The handcuffs came off. Jonathan's wrists were red, cut in places where the metal had dug in. He flexed his hands. "Sir," Cole said, "are you injured?" Jonathan touched his face. His lip was split, his cheek was scraped. "Nothing serious," he said. "We're taking you to get checked out anyway," Rodriguez said. "And we need to document your injuries, photographs, medical report, the full process." Jonathan nodded. Cole looked at Dunleavy. "We need all body camera footage from Officers Walsh, Garrett, and Brennan. All dash cam footage, all radio communications. Captain Carter's vehicle is still on the highway. We need it secured and processed as evidence." "And Chief," Cole added, "the Marine Corps is very interested in how 3 of your officers thought it was appropriate to assault one of theirs on a public highway. I suggest you preserve everything, because this isn't going away quietly." By noon, the video had been viewed 2 million times. Philip Henderson's recording. Clear footage, clear audio. The internet did what the internet does. Amplified, spread demanded answers. The hashtag Marine in Blues was trending, and news stations picked it up. Marine Corps officer assaulted during highway stop. Video shows brutality. The image was everywhere. Jonathan face down on the highway, his white cover hat 20 feet away. 3 officers on top of him, his dress blues scraped and dirty. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss, impossible to bury. The California Highway Patrol issued a statement. "We are aware of the incident involving Officers Walsh and Garrett. The matter has been referred to NCIS and the Department of Justice. We are cooperating fully with all investigations." The Marine Corps issued their own statement. "The assault of Captain Jonathan Carter is unacceptable. We expect full accountability from all parties involved. Captain Carter is a decorated officer who has served his country with honor. He deserves to be treated with the respect his service has earned." Behind closed doors, the language was stronger. In Washington, a Pentagon official told a room of investigators, "I don't care about jurisdiction. I don't care about local politics. One of our captains was assaulted while in dress blues. Find every piece of evidence, build an airtight case, and make sure those officers never wear a badge again." The FBI Civil Rights Division opened an investigation within 24 hours. The Department of Justice began reviewing Richmond PD's history, looking for patterns. They found them. Walsh's 11 complaints, Garrett's 7. All the buried reports. All the dismissed accusations. All the Black and Latino victims who'd been told there wasn't enough evidence. Suddenly, there was evidence. Mountains of it. Internal Affairs pulled every stop Walsh and Garrett had made in the past 5 years. They found pattern after pattern. Pretextual stops in minority neighborhoods. Aggressive language. Disproportionate use of force. And supervisors who'd signed off on everything. Never saw a pattern. Never thought it was worth investigating. 2 supervisors were placed on immediate administrative leave. Lieutenant Mark Stevens, Sergeant Dennis Cole. Both had reviewed complaints against Walsh. Both had marked them unfounded or not sustained. Both were now being asked to explain why, under oath, to federal investigators. Their explanations didn't hold up. Week 2 brought the grand jury. NCIS presented the evidence. Body cam footage from all 3 officers. Philip Henderson's civilian recording. Other videos from passing motorists. Jonathan's medical records. Split lip, facial abrasions, wrist lacerations, shoulder strain, expert testimony on use of force standards. At no point did Captain Carter resist. At no point was force justified. This was an assault, not an arrest. The grand jury deliberated for 90 minutes. They returned indictments against all three officers. Walsh, assault under color of authority, deprivation of civil rights under federal law, filing a false police report, conspiracy to obstruct justice, Garrett. Assault under color of authority, deprivation of civil rights, filing a false report, Brennan, failure to intervene, accessory after the fact, official misconduct. All three were arrested at their homes in the morning. Just like they'd arrested so many others. The media covered it, perp walks, mugshots, the whole process. Walsh's mugshot showed a man who still looked defiant. Garrett looked scared. Brennan looked like he wanted to disappear. They were processed, released on bail, ordered to surrender their passports, and told they were facing federal prison time. Week 3 brought the civil lawsuit. Jonathan's attorney filed in federal court. $10 million in damages. The complaint was detailed, specific, damning. It named Walsh and Garrett personally. It named Brennan. It named their supervisors. It named Chief Dunleavy. It named the city of Richmond. And it laid out the pattern. For years, Officers Walsh and Garrett have targeted minority motorists with pretextual stops, aggressive tactics, and excessive force. The city of Richmond has received 18 complaints against these officers. All were dismissed without proper investigation. As this created a culture of impunity that culminated in the assault of Captain Jonathan Carter, a decorated Marine Corps officer, on a public highway while he was in full military dress uniform, for no reason other than the color of his skin. The city's insurance company reviewed the evidence, watched the videos, read the medical reports, examined the pattern of complaints. They told the city, "Settle now, because if this goes to trial, you'll lose, and it'll cost you more than money. It'll cost you credibility." But Richmond City Council wanted to fight it. "We can't just pay out millions every time." Their attorney cut them off. "Have you watched the video? Have you seen a Marine Corps officer in dress blues face down on the highway? Have you heard the audio of your officers calling his credentials fake while he's got combat medals on his chest?" He paused. "Because a jury will, and they'll award him everything he's asking for, and more." The council went quiet. The most damaging evidence came from the body cams themselves. Not just what they showed, but what they heard. Walsh on camera. "You don't look like any Marine I've ever seen." Garrett on camera. Subject actively resisting. While video shows Jonathan motionless. And the moment that sealed it. Walsh to Garrett, thinking the mic wouldn't pick it up. "We got cameras. Say he was resisting. Consciousness of guilt on official recording. Undeniable." By month 2, Richmond PD had terminated all 3 officers for cause. Gross misconduct, excessive use of force, false reporting, violation of civil rights, and bringing disrepute to the department. Termination for cause meant no severance, no pensions, no benefits. The retirement money Walsh had been counting on for 16 years? Gone. California Post revoked their certifications. Permanently. Walsh, Garrett, and Brennan were barred from law enforcement. Anywhere in the state. For life. Walsh was 42 with no other skills. Garrett was 38 in the same situation. Brennan was 26 and his career was over before it began. All because they couldn't see past Jonathan's skin color. Couldn't believe a black man could be a Marine officer. Couldn't imagine that someone who didn't look like them could deserve respect, and it was all on camera. Month 4 brought the criminal trials. Walsh went first. He'd refused a plea deal. Thought he could convince a jury. He was wrong. The prosecution played the video, the full video, Philip Henderson's recording and all 3 body cams, side by side. The jury watched Jonathan pull over, saw him inform the officers he was a Marine, saw him hand over his credentials, saw Walsh laugh and call them fake. They heard Walsh say, "You don't look like any Marine I've ever seen." They watched Jonathan be forced to the ground despite zero resistance. Watched his face hit the highway. Watched his cover hat fall and roll away. The defense tried to argue Jonathan had been aggressive, that he'd refused commands. That force was necessary, but the video showed something different. Showed a calm, respectful Marine officer, doing everything right, and being assaulted anyway. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Walsh to 6 years in federal prison. You were given authority, the judge said, a badge, a weapon, the public's trust, and you used that authority to assault a man who has served this country with distinction. You attacked him not because he broke the law, not because he was dangerous, but because you decided he didn't look like he belonged in that uniform. That tells me everything I need to know about you, and everything a jury needed to know. 6 years. No early release. Federal time. Walsh would be 48 when he got out. No career, no pension, no future in law enforcement. Just a federal conviction for civil rights violations. Garrett watched Walsh's trial, saw the verdict, heard the sentence. He took a plea deal. 5 years federal prison, as in exchange for his cooperation and a guilty plea. His attorney had told him the truth. You're on video assaulting a Marine. There's no defense. Take the deal. So he did. At his sentencing, Garrett said he was sorry, that he'd made a mistake, that he'd let Walsh lead him astray. The judge wasn't impressed. You're a grown man, the judge said. You made your own choices. You put your hands on Captain Carter. You put your knee on his back. You lied about him resisting. You don't get to blame your partner for your decisions. 5 years. Brennan pleaded guilty to failure to intervene. He stood in front of the judge and tried to explain. I was new. I didn't know what to do. I was scared to go against senior officers. The judge cut him off. You were a police officer. You had a duty, not to Walsh, not to Garrett, to the public, to justice. You watched them assault a man and did nothing. Your silence enabled brutality. And that ends your career at 26 years old. 2 years probation, community service, permanent loss of certification. Brennan would never be a cop again. Would spend the rest of his life explaining why. The civil case settled in month 6. The city had tried to negotiate down from $10 million. Offered $2 million. Jonathan's team countered at 8. They settled at $4.5 million. One of the largest police brutality settlements in California history. But the money was just part of it. The settlement included mandatory reforms, an independent civilian oversight board, with real power, real authority to discipline officers, body cam footage released within 48 hours of any use of force incident, no exceptions, a ban on hiring officers with sustained excessive force complaints, no more Walshes getting second chances, community policing training for every officer, de-escalation certification required, and an early warning system to flag officers with complaint patterns before they became problems. The Department of Justice imposed a consent decree. 5 years of federal oversight, an external monitor with veto power over internal affairs, quarterly public reports on stops, force incidents, complaints, complete rewrite of use of force policies. Richmond PD was now under federal control, all because 3 cops couldn't see past their own racism. The total cost to Richmond, $4.5 million to Jonathan, $2 million in class action settlements to other victims of Walsh and Garrett, $1.8 million in legal fees, $900,000 annually for consent decree compliance. Total $9.2 million for 1 highway stop, for 1 Marine officer in dress blues, for 3 cops who thought they were untouchable. The city council had to cut budgets, raise taxes, explain to taxpayers why their money was paying for police brutality, and every time they had to explain it, they had to show the video. Jonathan on the highway, face down, in dress blues, cover hat in the road. The image the city couldn't escape. The reminder of what happens when you protect bad cops. The Marine Corps promoted Jonathan to major 8 months after the assault. The ceremony was held at Camp Pendleton, full dress uniform. His mother attended. She'd flown in from Ohio, stood proud as the base commander pinned the new rank insignia on her son's uniform. Jonathan also received the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Not for combat, but for extraordinary restraint and professionalism during an unprovoked assault that brought honor to the Marine Corps and exemplified the highest standards of military bearing under extreme circumstances. The citation didn't say it directly, but everyone knew what it meant. He'd been attacked, humiliated, had every right to fight back, but he didn't, because he knew that restraint would be more powerful than resistance. His mother spoke at the ceremony. "When Jonathan joined the Marines," she said, "I was scared. Scared of deployment, scared of combat, scared I'd lose him overseas." She paused, looked at her son. "I never thought I'd have to be scared of him driving on an American highway, in his own uniform, whilst in his own country. But I'm proud of how he handled it. I raised him to be strong. The Marines taught him to be disciplined." That morning on Highway 101, he was both. The Marines in attendance stood and applauded. 2 months later, Jonathan was invited to testify before Congress, a committee examining police reform and accountability. He sat at the witness table in his dress blues, the same uniform he'd been wearing that morning. He spoke calmly, precisely, the way Marines are trained to speak. "I served 2 combat tours," he told the committee. "I faced enemy fire in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been shot at. I've been in firefights. I've lost brothers in combat. But I was never more afraid than I was on Highway 101, face down on American asphalt, in my own uniform, on my way back to my own base. Us being assaulted by the people who are supposed to protect me." He paused. "And here's what I learned. Documentation matters. Witnesses matter. Philip Henderson's courage to stop and record, that saved me. The body cameras that officers couldn't turn off, that proved the truth. Federal oversight that prevented local cover-up, that delivered justice. Accountability is possible, but only when we refuse to look away." The committee members thanked him for his service, for his testimony, for his courage. Several of them shook his hand afterward, told him they'd make sure his story led to real change. Jonathan hoped they meant it. Jonathan used part of his settlement to launch a nonprofit. Serve and Protect Veterans. Legal support for military veterans experiencing police misconduct. The donations poured in from veterans, as from active duty service members, from civilians who'd seen the video and wanted to help. Within a year, the nonprofit was helping dozens of veterans navigate the legal system, documenting incidents, connecting them with attorneys, providing support. Because Jonathan knew he wasn't the only one. Knew that veterans, especially veterans of color, faced this all the time. Getting stopped, getting questioned, getting told their service didn't matter as much as their skin color. But now there was somewhere they could turn. Someone who understood. Someone who'd been there. Walsh was in federal prison, finding out that other inmates don't like cops, especially cops convicted of civil rights violations. He'd been attacked twice in the first 6 months, put in protective custody, which meant 23 hours a day in a cell. His wife had divorced him, taken the kids. He hadn't seen them in months. Garrett was in a different facility, serving his 5 years. He'd found religion in prison, claimed he was a changed man, wrote letters to Jonathan apologizing. Jonathan never responded. Brennan was working at a warehouse, living with his parents at 28. He'd applied for security jobs, loss prevention, anything adjacent to law enforcement. But background checks always came back the same. Terminated for cause from police department. Failed to intervene in civil rights violation. Permanent loss of certification. No one would hire him. He'd thought staying silent would protect him. Instead, it destroyed everything. Philip Henderson was honored by the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Veteran Citizen of the Year. His decision to stop that morning. To record. To refuse to leave, to call Camp Pendleton. It had saved Jonathan and changed everything. Philip still lived in Richmond, still drove that highway sometimes. He'd never forget that morning, seeing a Marine in dress blues face down on the road, knowing he had to do something. "I'm a veteran," Philip said in interviews. "When I see another service member in trouble, I don't drive past. That's not what we do. We look out for each other. Always." His intervention became a case study, taught in bystander intervention trainings across the country. Richmond's new police chief took the reform seriously. Body cameras stayed on. Footage was released quickly. Complaints were actually investigated. The Civilian Oversight Board terminated 3 more officers in its first year. Disciplined 12 others. For the first time in years, there was real accountability. The department's training academy now uses Jonathan's case. Every cadet watches the full video, discusses what went wrong, what should have happened, how to prevent it. The training bulletin shows a still frame from the body cam. Jonathan face down, dress blues scraped, cover hat 20 feet away. The caption, "What failure looks like." 2 years after the assault, Jonathan was driving through Richmond, going to visit Philip Henderson, to thank him again, to stay in touch. He was in civilian clothes this time, off duty, got pulled over for a broken taillight. His stomach still tightened when he saw the lights, muscle memory from that morning. But he went through the routine, pulled over, hands visible. The officer who approached was young, mid-20s, professional. "Good afternoon, sir. License and registration, please." Jonathan handed them over. The officer saw the Camp Pendleton address. "You military, sir?" "Yes," Jonathan said. "Marine Corps, Major Carter." The officer nodded. "Thank you for your service, sir. I'm going to give you a warning for the taillight. Just get it fixed." "I appreciate that, officer." The officer started to walk back, then paused, turned around. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, are you the Major Carter from the Highway 101 incident?" Jonathan hesitated, then nodded. "I watched that video in the academy," the officer said. It's part of our training now. What those officers did, it was wrong. I just wanted you to know. Things are different now. We're trying to be better." Jonathan looked at him. Young guy, probably went through the new training. Probably saw the reforms firsthand. "I hope so," Jonathan said. "Yeah, for everyone's sake." The officer nodded. "Drive safe, sir." And that was it. No drama, no violence, no humiliation. Just a traffic stop that ended the way it should. With respect, and a warning to fix a taillight. 4 years into his sentence, Walsh sat in the prison visitation room. His father across the table. Older now. Tired. "I still don't understand how it happened," his father said. "You were always such a good son, a good officer. How did it come to this?" Walsh was quiet for a long time. "I thought the badge made me right," he finally said. "Thought it gave me the authority to decide who belonged and who didn't, who deserved respect and who didn't, who looked like they should be wearing a uniform and who didn't." He looked down at his hands. "That Marine, Captain Carter, he had everything. Credentials, uniform, service record, but I couldn't see past his skin color. Couldn't imagine that someone who looked like him could be what he said he was." His father asked the question Walsh had been avoiding. "Was he right? Was Captain Carter right to fight this?" Walsh looked up. "He wasn't fighting," he said quietly. "That's the thing. He never fought, never resisted, just took it and then let the system work. And yeah, he was right, about everything." Major Jonathan Carter's $4.5 million settlement didn't just change his life. It changed an entire police department, changed federal policy, changed how the Marines protect their own, changed how we think about accountability. 3 careers were destroyed, but countless future victims were protected. That's the video that Philip Henderson recorded that morning, the body cam footage that couldn't be erased, the federal oversight that wouldn't look away. All of it together proved something important. Accountability is possible. Justice is possible. Change is possible. Not because systems want to change, but because people like Jonathan Carter refuse to accept injustice quietly. Because people like Philip Henderson refuse to drive past. Because cameras capture truth that can't be buried. That's the story. That's what $4.5 million bought. Not just money, not just revenge, but proof. Proof that even when you're face down on a highway, even when your dress blues are scraped, even when your cover hat is lying in the road like trash, you can still stand up, Still fight, still win, not with violence, but with evidence, with witnesses, with the refusal to let injustice disappear. Jonathan Carter is still a Marine, still serves his country, still wears those dress blues with pride. And somewhere in Richmond, California, young police officers are watching his video in training, learning what failure looks like, learning that the badge doesn't make you right. It makes you accountable. And 3 former officers learned that lesson the hardest way possible, in federal prison, with no badge, no pension, no future, all because they forgot one simple truth. The uniform doesn't lie, the video doesn't lie, and justice, when you give it enough evidence and enough courage, doesn't lose.